400,000 gay, bisexual, transgender, and lesbian youth experience at least one episode of homelessness each year in the United States. This was founded by Jeffrey Ream and Nicholas Forge when they published this in the 2014 Child Welfare Journal. My subtopic will be about how LGBTQ youth are at a higher risk for homelessness. First, I'm going to start off with some definitions that are relevant to my presentation. First, homophobia is either the fear of a heterosexual having to be around a homosexual or just someone who's different, has a different sexuality than their own. It can also be the self-loathing of a homosexual because of societal standards. Next, I'm going to talk about heteronormativity. This is basically the idea that heterosexual is the norm for society and that there's only two distinct genders. Last, sexual prejudice. This is negative feelings or violent actions towards an individual solely based on their sexuality. Now I'm going to talk about why people in the LGBTQ community are more at risk for homelessness, or what has caused their homelessness. First of all, I have this graph that has been split into LGBTQ and transgender because they have different experiences. As you can see, overwhelmingly, these pink bars are both for people who responded that they were forced out or ran away from their homes. The other subtopics are family issues, aged out of foster care, abuse at home, or family poverty. Youth in the LGBT community experience victimization in both home and at school. This is what leads them to being such a high part of the homelessness. As you can see here, LGBTQ youth only make up 7% of the total youth population. However, they make up 40% of the homeless youth population. In 2014, authors David B. Brinkerhoff, Rose Weitz, and Suzanne Traeger Ortega published a textbook titled Essentials of Sociology under Wadsworth Sinnage Learning. In this textbook, the authors discussed a variety of social influences on behavior. The textbook explains that in many high schools, for example, gay male teens are taunted, bullied, or even physically assaulted, almost always by other guys. Yet, at least some of these other guys think there's nothing wrong with being gay. Nonetheless, they join in harassing gays and fear that they themselves will be ostracized if they don't do so. This creates an unsafe learning environment for those in the LGBT community and often leads people to dropping out of school and finding them in other, much less helpful ways of spending their time. Now I'm going to talk about some of the effects of being homeless as an LGBTQ youth. I have another graph here that splits up the needs of LGBTQ youth and transgender youth. Obviously, for both of these groups, the most important thing is housing, which is the pink pie part. However, after that, it differs. For LGBTQ, the most important thing that they need after housing is acceptance and emotional support. However, for transgender youth, it is transition-related support. As a youth in the LGBTQ community that is homeless, they could experience the effects of survival sex, which is basically having no other means to survive or make money than having to participate in sex or prostitution, because at some points the LGBTQ youth are not even old enough to have a job but are still found homeless. From survival sex, they can get STDs, become pregnant, and they will also be living in poverty, could have substance abuse issues, and also suicidal thoughts. Shannon K. Katari and Stephanie Begun stated in their 2017 journal published in Journal of Women and Social Work that while often perceived as one of a few viable options for survival and self-sufficiency on the streets, survival sex has been linked with numerous adverse outcomes, including elevated rates of HIV and sexually transmitted infections. These were based off the findings of Rashami Gangamama in the 2008 article published in Journal of Youth and Adolescence. Now I'm going to talk about intersections. Race, health, gender, age, and sexuality of an LGBTQ community member that is homeless will affect their experience that they have when they are homeless. Intersections is what we learned about in class, about how different aspects of one's person gives them a unique perspective on life. The most important thing to note with intersections and LGBTQ homelessness is preferences for survival sex. More often it is females that are either gay or lesbian or have transitioned to become females that are at a higher risk for having to participate in survival sex. Another concept that we went over in class is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. As a LGBTQ homeless person, you are not getting your basic needs of food, water, warmth, rest, security, or safety. This means that they are unable to move up in the rankings and participate in their psychological needs or their self-fulfillment needs. Being in the LGBTQ community, it is already hard enough to participate in the psychological needs or the self-fulfillment needs because you are already discriminated against. On top of that, if you become homeless, you are unable to meet your basic needs, and so you're unable to even work on your psychological or self-fulfillment needs. Now I'm going to talk about some of the policy that goes in with this. In 1964, there was a Civil Rights Act that made it illegal to discriminate based on race or gender or sexuality. However, in 2017, the Department of Justice argued at the federal court that the Title VII anti-discrimination protections do not cover sexual orientation. Though this was shot down and not supported, it is important to note that under the Trump administration, some people do not believe that sexual orientation is a wrong reason to let someone go from a job or something of that nature. Again, though this was shot down, it is important to understand that things like this could start being more prevalent in our policies, and we need to continue to use our civic duty to stop this from happening. Now I'm going to talk about a Jesuit value. The one that I chose for my presentation is men and women for and with others. Here I added an asterisk and added "and all other genders." It is important to note that gender is actually a social construct and it has nothing to do with one's trait as a person. So someone's traits are not inherited solely based on their sex organs. They're instead caused by social structures that are put in place. It is important to note that whether we are going through the issues or know someone or maybe don't even know anyone, that we should stand up and stand with the people who are going through homelessness or who are struggling with their sexual identity. One resource that I found in Omaha is the Youth Emergency Services. Something important that I think is that when asked all social services that worked with homelessness, 99.3% said that at some point they worked with LGBTQ homeless youth. This is really important because it shows how much of an issue this is. So YES, or Youth Emergency Services, has multiple different phone numbers that you can call that can help you with whatever issues you're experiencing. There is an emergency assistance, youth street outreach, emergency shelter, transitional living, as well as maternity home. This is important because, like I said before, with survival sex, one of the outcomes of this can end up in a pregnancy. The last thing I'm going to talk about is human dignity. Human dignity is the sense of self-respect and self-worth of some person. So what we need to do is we need to empower people in the LGBTQ community. We can do this by, again, standing up for them and standing with them. And that's my works cited. Thank you.